and I are going to be
Welcome to Media Path. I'm Louise Palanker.
And I'm Fritz Coleman.
Our guest, Illeana Douglas, teaches us that all of us have been changed by our interactions with the movies. And we have also recently gained an increased ability to curate our own media playlist and to access titles we've long heard about but never seen. You can allow the work of Illeana Douglas to guide your way along your movie history path. She's written 2 wonderful books about her love of movies, and she currently hosts movie events and celebrations at TCM. Illeana is coming right up. But first, Fritz, we are deep into election season. During this time in history when we all need to do more than just vote, Myra Page and Joan Bowman are leading the way on that front. They work with a mission-driven postcard writing organization called Commit to Democracy. Welcome, Myra and Joan.
Yeah, we timed that pretty well, didn't we?
Boy, no kidding.
Yeah. So first, before we get into your organization, how are you guys feeling about the VP pick today?
Boy.
Thrilled.
Yeah.
Optimistic.
Yes.
Excited.
Yeah.
I think everybody is so happy with her choice, and I think it's going to be a great ticket.
I think Tim Walz is a plain talk savant. He will boil it down. And Joan, you made the point earlier that at his core, he's a teacher.
Yeah, at his core, he's a teacher.
Yeah.
Also, I think he has a wonderful way of turning the progressive agenda into sounding like middle America.
Yeah.
And
But a teacher and a 30-year veteran of, the Guard, National Guard, and he was one of the first people to support the LGBTQ students at his high school. I just love everything about him. But I think his greatest quality is he's fast and funny, and he's going to decimate his opponents.
Well, that's what we want, isn't it?
Yes.
We want that orange crush.
Yeah. We do.
Isn't that a great time?
All right. Tell us about Commit to Democracy and how you both got involved.
well, Commit to Democracy is an action-oriented organization, and we do postcarding, texting, and phone banking as well. Mm-hmm. And the organization itself got started in 2016 when our founder actually left her Bay Area executive position to start the organization because she was so devastated by the Trump victory. And she has, and also the 2 new leaders now, Linda Carmen and Molly Herms, have turned it into a 14,000 member strong organization nationwide.
Wow.
So since the Kamala announcement, I call it, I hope they make it a national holiday, the day when she, but did you notice a huge increase in the enthusiasm for what you do?
Enormous.
Good.
It went through the roof almost instantaneously. And our requests for postcards just through the roof. We are busy 24/7 now with filling orders for postcards, with texting, with phone banking. I think the excitement was something that people didn't count on, weren't expecting, and then there it was for us. And so we're riding that wave.
Well, what I found fascinating reading about your organization is even with social media, grassroots work like you're doing is still very, very important. Postcards, texting, phone banking. Talk about each of those and how important each is into the construct of what you guys are doing.
Well, we realize that, to get a voter to vote, it's a multi-pronged attack. So our thinking is you hit them with phone calls, you hit them with text messages, and you hit them with postcards. And apparently, the research shows that you have to touch base with a voter at least 5 to 7 times to actually have an effect. But like postcarding, some people say, postcarding doesn't matter. Well, it does, because it's like a 1 to 2% return. And with the margins now so close, especially in the swing states, and even down ballot in states that might be democratically safe, it makes a difference. Mm-hmm.
Weezy brought up a good point when we were talking about you guys coming on, about the importance of a postcard. You think that's old school and it's an antiquated thing, but Weezy said, no, if you get that postcard in the mail and you're going to use it eventually to remind you to vote, you'll put it by the stand at your front door.
You'll put it on your refrigerator.
And it will remind you several times.
Exactly.
Give us an example of these postcards. I've written batches of postcards for you guys. And I had the fun of selecting colored markers, and I draw a lot of hearts. I'm big with hearts, butterflies, birds, And you can just make it fun. So people who got my postcard really think that this adorable fourth grader went out of her way to send it, and because that's my handwriting. And so you put it, because with the noise of the texts and the emails, we're just deleting. But the postcard comes and it's like, look at what this child made for me. Like, she's so creative. So yeah, I think a postcard can cut through the noise. As just a reminder in busy days and busy families, like, oh, fill out my ballot, or, this is your polling place, because they're very personalized to each district.
We are very careful with the script. Mm-hmm. When people pick up their postcard packets, it has the amount of postcards they need. Mm-hmm. It has a list of names and addresses to write to, and it has the script that they use. So everybody follows the same, I guess, rules.
Mm-hmm. And you're not on your own. You train people how to work in each of these venues, right? You teach them the postcard and the texting. And you said something about the computers, which was very interesting. You don't have to do it on the phone. You can do it on your
If you're texting, phone banking, exactly.
Computer, because it keeps you anonymous that way, correct?
Exactly.
Right.
Oh,
so,
yeah. And they have computer programs now where it just keeps dialing until someone says hello. Mm-hmm. Like, it goes past all the voicemails, and all of a sudden someone says hello, and you're like, hello?
Right.
You get a little scared when
you're
live.
Okay, so you
what do I say?
So tell me how they can volunteer.
So there are hubs across California.
And
Joan and I are in Santa Barbara and Montecito. But there are hubs all over Northern California, Central California, Southern California.
And they're accessible with committodemocracy.com.
Correct.
2 the number 2.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right. And that will tell you the hub in your area.
Exactly.
And tell us what you have learned doing this work.
To me, I think the one thing, there are several things. First of all, you find out that you have friends and neighbors down the street, across the street, around the corner, who you didn't even know existed. And suddenly you have this neighborhood full of people who are riding with you, for you, and who are constantly coming up to your doorstep and picking up a packet of postcards that we have prepared for them. Mm-hmm. The level of camaraderie that we have discovered in a time that, especially in a media-driven environment, which we are in, where reality is mixed up with alternative facts and lies and insults and rhetoric that has no place in the political arena, Joan and I have found this level of camaraderie that has made us so much happier, involved, dedicated, and it's something that has worked for both of us. And
it's a good old-fashioned barn raising. It's a joint purpose.
It's a whole different ballgame now. This is not even the election from 2008.
Yeah.
This is so different.
Although they're seeing similarities with the wisdom of Barack Obama choosing Joe Biden because he had such a lunch pail, working man, blue-collar sensibility, and that's what Tim
here we
Walz
go again.
brings.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. And so you're not only trying to get people to vote for candidates, but you're investigating and advocating for flippable districts.
Exactly.
Right? Tell us who you think is the most vulnerable and who we should be watching.
Well, I think I'd rather say it more like, for instance, here in California, there are flippable districts we think we can flip. And, in 2022, we said the road to the house is through California, and we didn't deliver. But we have identified 5 campaigns
Agreed.
that we
Senate
think are flippable.
or House?
Congressional.
House.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Adam Schiff is pretty safe.
So,
And then we also write to Ohio. We've written for Sherrod Brown. We've done New York, 2 districts in New York, because New York is another state where we can, flip a lot of seats and get back the House. So we write in at least 2 of those districts right now.
Right.
Pennsylvania. But
Pennsylvania,
we also,
Nevada, Arizona.
And we do a very robust register to vote campaign in the early days. We never stopped, because that's the other thing.
We
in
go
terms
year
of
round.
Community. Yeah, in the old days, you used to think, in 2 months before the election, you start kind of asking people for your vote. No, it is, you have to cultivate relationships, and like Myra said, our relationship and our hub in Santa Barbara is a microcosm of thousands of groups like us across the country. And I don't know if I think you both know Simon Rosenberg. He has told us, because we also do town hall meetings, and he's been at our town hall meetings at least 4 times. He said, you are the superpower, the grassroots superpower of the Democratic Party. So we feel we're part of a bigger movement other than our own.
You're doing the Lord's work, lady.
Yeah.
And have you I mean, there seems to be from the media this huge groundswell of youth registration. That's what everybody was worried about. Both the Democrats and Republicans were worried about, a lackadaisical or a non-interested youth vote, but it looks like boom.
They're actually very interested. It's a matter of kind of getting them to the polls. And I think that they're so excited about this team that's in front of us right now. I think that they're going to do just that. But you have to work for it. You have to reach these people.
Well, if you are yearning to save democracy and make meaningful connections with new friends who are just waiting to meet you, go to committodemocracy.com. You'll be typing the number 2 where the word 2 goes. From there, you just type in your name and your email address, click the word join, and you are on your way to improving your life and the lives of your children, your grandchildren, and your cats. So I would like to thank you two for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
All righty. Now we're going to have you step over into first class while we introduce our lovely guest, Illeana.
Let's welcome our next guest. Illeana Douglas is an actress, writer, producer, and director known for playing fearless and outspoken characters in such films as Stir of Echoes, To Die For, Grace of My Heart, Cape Fear, and Alive. She is the granddaughter of 2-time Academy Award-winning actor Melvin Douglas. Her first book, I Blame Dennis Hopper, and Other Stories from a Life Lived in and Out of the Movies, was named one of the best books of 2015 by Entertainment Weekly. A classic film lover, Illeana is a member of the Turner Classic Movies family and is interviewed a pantheon of cinema greats and hosted many TCM Spotlight series. Her newest book is called Connecticut in the Movies. Welcome, Illeana Douglas.
Hi. Nice to see you guys.
Nice to see you. Your childhood went from suburbia to hippie commune when your dad was profoundly influenced by Easy Rider, and it was a movie that uprooted you, but then you too were able to find your balance and your true north in the movies.
Yes. That was sort of the basis of my first book. I had an experience where I'd met Mike Nichols. I actually went to a screening with the director, Glenn Gordon Caron, of The Graduate, and I brought a Nichols in May album, and Glenn was looking at me like, "You're going to actually give him that album to sign?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a huge fan." He's like, "You're like a recognizable actress. He's going to know," But I didn't think he would. I cared more about getting the signature. Anyway, when I got up to greet him, I shyly handed over the album, and then he was very complimentary, and he gave me kind of a dissertation about what he liked about my acting, which is, he said, whenever I see you in a movie, it's like you're in the movie, but it's also like you're outside the movie, like you're in the audience and you somehow got in the movie and you're communicating to us. Like, do you see what's going on here? Can you believe this? And I said, that sounds like my entire life. You've kind of figured it out for me, that sometimes I'm in the movie. So sometimes as a child, I was observing the movie, like the hippies and everything, and thinking, I don't really want to be in this movie. And then I kind of had a realization that my grandfather was Melvin Douglas and I didn't have to be. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I can ride to the set in a limousine and I can be in the movies. So it's always been that kind of objective, subjective personality that I have. I'm a huge fan of the movies, from being kind of, a shy, lonely kid, artistic, and delving into books and movies to kind of find my friends. But then I also had a joy of performing. And so many of the people that I would write about, that I would see when I was a kid on a movie, then I would end up acting with them. But I always have this boundary of like, I can't believe I know this person. So it's always that insider outsider point of view that I think I write from. that people hopefully find interesting.
Oh my God, you're such a great writer.
Illeana,
Yeah.
I love you in a platonic and not stalkery way. But I
Thank
love
you.
you. You are a very funny writer. I just enjoyed
Thank you.
Dennis Hopper. But you talked about it before. You like from the outside looking in. I think one of the charming things about that book is that you really fangirled out, even though you were in the business. You were a huge fan of these people you run into, and you could feel the nervousness in you when you passed Robert De Niro in the hall at the Brill Building, and you met all these people. And I just thought that's so charming because you wrote how people feel who are not in the business when they encounter somebody like that. It was cute.
Yes, but I also look up to them, and I understand. I mean, I always call myself the rememberer, because I feel like I've kept copious notes and diaries going back to when I first started acting. I met Roddy McDowall, and he said to me, you're going to meet a lot of interesting people. I'm one of them. Start writing about.
Start writing. Yeah.
Start writing. And he handed me my first diary. And so I started out, I would have autograph books on set, and some of it was a part of like, I can't believe I'm here. I need proof. Like maybe if Robert Mitchum signs this thing, I'll really believe I deserve to be here. But then as I grew as an actor, I realized, and it was funny, you said at the beginning, have you really read all those books? And sometimes people say, why do you know so much about movies? I've been looking at movies, since I was 5 years old. And then I've also been lucky enough to be a part of listening to my grandfather's stories. And so part of my love of film history, I think, was because I was so enamored with my grandfather. And so if he was having, Myrna Loy over, he was going to take me to visit Paulette Goddard, I'd want to know about them. And so I would always ask for movie books. I asked him for a subscription to New York Magazine. So,
He was a great supporter. Your grandfather was a great advocate of yours.
You must have thought you were the most delightful child ever created. But the thing that really intrigues me about your life is you seem to have so many full circle moments because you will them into being. It's not, it's the universe is constantly giving you closure. It's really interesting.
Yeah, talk about the Dennis Hopper closure when you woke up from being knocked unconscious and he was standing right in your face. Can you tell that story?
Well, again, Dennis Hopper looms large in my life because, jokingly as a kid, I would always blame him like he was the reason that my parents, wanted to become the hippies because they saw the movie, they saw them as everybody did in 1969. They saw the movie and, wanted to live a kind of a different life, less commercial, etc. And so that was a part of my growing up, those kind of values. And then I realized that, as I went into New York, that I was living this complete poverty because I couldn't afford to go to college or anything like that. So really the only route I had was to become an actor like my grandfather. And I was starving most of the time. So in the back of my head, I always had this, I blamed Dennis Hopper for those experiences.
But your dad prepared you for poverty because of the influence of Easy Rider, he came home and became a stage 4 hippie. Then he totally went broke. Your family was bankrupt and left your mom. And he was like, and so you were forced into poverty and then had to make it on your own. So you were emotionally prepared for lying on floors and eating hot dogs.
Well, no, actually not really, because again, I knew that there was this other world where you could be in a limousine and, hang out with John Houseman and Fred Astaire. So I knew that, I said, I've got to get into that world. And so part of that world was going to New York and going to acting school and doing all of that. But cut to many years later, and I'm in the movies, and then I'm going to be doing a movie called Search and Destroy, and they cast as my older man, lover, mentor, Dennis Hopper. And I just think, oh, this is going to be amazing because I can't wait to meet him and tell him how much he ruined my life. Because I'd always imagined or envisioned that because, and this is a little bit about what the second book is about, is again this push-pull of having relatives in New York and then growing up in Connecticut. It's very, 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 very different. But I always had imagined for myself, I'm very smart and well-read, and I should probably have gone to Smith College and, been a publicist or something. But I didn't have those avenues. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to be in show business because that's what poor people with talent do. So cut to then many years later, and I'm going to be in the movie with Dennis Hopper, and it's my first day of work, and I'm really excited because I think it's going to be funny, and I get to tell them all about my crazy childhood. And on the way to work, because the movie was a low budget movie, the driver fell asleep at the wheel, and we had a cut, which seems hard to believe. We were only going 30 miles an hour, but on Park Avenue, we got in a car accident. We hit another car, and I didn't have my seatbelt on, and I went flying forward and got a concussion, got knocked unconscious. And it was such a low budget movie that there actually was no walkie-talkie in the car, and I had to walk to the set while he stayed with the police. So I was like holding my head, which was by this time really, really hurting. And I get to the set, and by that point I'm in a lot of pain, and I just was laying down on the ground with my eyes closed. And then, as they say, I heard these voices. I heard Ethan Hawke talking, and then I heard this voice, and I thought it was like my life flashing before my eyes because I could hear my father talking. And then I realized, no, that's actually Dennis Hopper, like cradling my head, And so, yes, talk about a full circle.
Wow.
And so I looked up at him, and I started crying because I was like, this is not how I wanted to meet you. And then he was trying to get me to stop talking. And I said, no, I'm crying because I was excited. I wanted to meet you. And he said, stop talking. You've had a concussion. That means your brain moved inside your head. It's not supposed to do that. I was getting doctor advice.
Did you tell him the story of your family?
Mm-hmm.
Not that particular day, because then I was off to the hospital. But of course, once I got better, yes, it became just an incredible story. We bonded and laughed, and I said, I started to seriously say, how many people's lives do you think you actually ruined? And then that's where the original idea came. I had originally wanted to do a documentary with me and Dennis Hopper, as my father. I was going to make, in a sense, make him be my father, since, and we would drive around and we would meet other people whose lives he had ruined, quote unquote. Now, as I made clear in the book, by the meeting of Hopper and putting everything in perspective, is that, of course, you realize, that it didn't ruin my life. It was, the best possible life, because it made me into the sort of rebellious person, that I am, who questions everything. And in a sense is very much like the movie Easy Rider. Now, and that was completely out of my control. And yet, coming full circle like that, you rarely get the opportunity to meet someone who changed your destiny. And he truly did change my destiny. And so that is really, really a gift. And all along the way, there have been people like that. I mean, maybe if I were more normal and had friends, I would have epiphanies with friends. But most of my epiphanies have come through Dennis Hopper, Marlon Brando.
Oh, God. To me, that was my favorite story of the whole thing. I hope we have time to reflect on that.
She's a tuning fork.
Oh, my God. That was hysterical. But you've had your entry into show business, your origin story in being in show business is theatrical in its own way, because you worked at a place called Camelot, which was a mob-owned dinner theater. That whole thing was sad but hysterical. Tell a little bit about that story. That was actually your first paying job in the business, right?
Why? I was paid as a
hostess,
cocktail waitress, and then I got fired immediately, and then I talked my way into being a hostess, and then I figured out very cleverly that as soon as I seated people, I would run backstage and pretend I was somebody important and ask, the stars that were there, like Donald O'Connor. I mean, these are people, where I say people's
Rudy
careers
Valley. It really touching
go to
stories.
die.
It's
Rudy
really
Valley
cool who winds up doing dinner theater in their 80s and 90s is like everyone you watched in movies that you grew up completely obsessed with.
Yes.
So it's really cool.
So of course I started talking to Rudy Valley. And I planted myself backstage, pretending I was supposed to be there. Like, can I help you with your coat? Would you like some tea? And so I think he got the idea that I somehow worked for the theater. So anyway, I would, so by the third day, I was right there with the coat. I was like, great show, Mr. Valley. Call me Rudy.
But first of all, it was a mob-owned establishment that you weren't aware of at first. It was something else, and then it became a dinner theater, and people weren't getting paid, and then suddenly they evaporated, and that was your first exposure to show business, which was sad. But
that was that was a good experience, because I've been on many movie sets that have shut down very quickly and nobody gets paid. So maybe that was my entree into show business. I saw a lot, But anyway, that particular theater, which came and went very quickly, so I had the opportunity to meet Rudy Valley. And then one night, he on his last night, he said, come back to my dressing room, and I thought, oh God, here it is. He's going to pounce on me. And as I was sitting there and he's dripping with sweat, 80-year-old man, he takes out this little tape recorder and he plays for me what I thought was the ocean. And he, turned around and we were having a conversation, which was already theatrical enough, where he's looking in the mirror talking to me. But he says, did you know what that is? And I said, is it the ocean? And he said, no, it's my applause.
It was his audience. I thought that was so cool.
So beautiful.
Because I tape it every night, and it was such an epiphany to me of like, wow, I'm meeting the essence of show business.
Yeah, so
right
here's
now.
an 80-year-old man working up a sweat.
But that's the high he's chasing.
Yeah, crazy.
And the full circles just keep on coming, because you work in the Brill Building for Peggy.
Yes.
And
right.
then
Peggy
you make
Siegel.
a movie about the Brill Building with Allison Anders. And it just keeps coming. And I think you manifest all this wonderful stuff because that's just who you are. So talk a little bit about that journey.
Again, just an incredibly fun experience. I went to work for Peggy Siegel because I knew a lot about movies, and I knew I could point out like, well, that's Joe Mankiewicz, and that's that's so I got the job, and I was working for her, and at that point, that's when Frank Perry gave me a small part in the movie. That's why he's on the cover. That's why I did The Swimmer, sort of as a dedication to my friendship with Frank Perry, who directed The Swimmer, who's like really overlooked director. But while I was, working there at the Brill Building, I got immersed in the history of the Brill Building, and then many years later, when I was working with Allison Anders. Again, it was completely accidental. We wanted to do a movie about Anne Sexton, the poet, and it didn't work out. And then one day we were talking on the phone about our love of the Brill Building, and she was saying, nobody's ever done a movie about the Brill Building. And then we started to talk about it, and we said, let's make a movie. Let's do a movie about the girl groups and sort of base it on Carole King and Joni Mitchell and people like that. And so that's what we did. And it was, and Allison's one of my dearest friends to this day. So I was so lucky I got to make that movie when I did.
When I read that you had an interest in the girl groups, I wondered if you saw the movie about Amy Winehouse called Back to Black. Have you seen that?
Of course.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Because those girl groups were a huge inspiration for her, too. It just made me think of her when I read that about you. But the Brill Building was the epicenter of most of the great music in the 60s and early 70s. But I also learned from you that other people in show business, like Martin Scorsese and all these people, had offices in that building. That place was packed.
Yeah, it was, my first day of work. Now this I did manifest. When I got the job for Peggy Siegel, very much like when I was at Camelot, I just pretended I was somebody. I was dressed to the nines, and I was absolutely convinced, I would be discovered in the elevator. Somebody would say, you're who I'm looking for my next movie. And literally the first time I got in the elevator, I rode in the elevator with Elaine May and Warren Beatty, and they were talking about Ishtar, which of course later on turned out to be so incredibly famous.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. And so you were always seeing, famous people in and around the Brill Building. People were editing their movies. So it was always very interesting. And that's how I got the job working for Frank Perry. He literally had forgotten to cast a day player in this movie called Hello Again. And he came running in and he said, "You're an actress, right?" And I said, "Right. I'm an actress who answers the phones." And he said, "No, I think I have a part for you. How'd you like to yell at Shelley Long?" Who wouldn't want to yell at Shelley Long?
Sign me up.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that was my start. And then the Brill Building came again because I did the whole movie about Grace of My Heart. And then I got cast in this movie called Picture Perfect. And where did we shoot? Many, many of the scenes, but in the Brill Building. So I kind of couldn't escape the place.
Wow.
Yeah.
So talk about going to work with your grandfather and meeting Peter Sellers for the first time.
Being there.
Oh, again, I was a very little kid, but this memory was sort of triggered by going to I thought I was going to a psychic, but it turned out she was a medium, and she asked me, who did I want to contact? And I said, I don't know, I guess maybe my grandfather. So when she contacted my grandfather, she said somebody is with him and he's on a unicycle. And I nearly fell over because now cut to many years ago, I'm a little kid and I'm on the set and I, want to meet Peter Sellers. And he gives me some advice about if I'm going to be in show business, always remember to ride a unicycle because it's hard and not everybody can do it, and we laugh. It's supposed to be like a funny joke and everything, and then years later, this strange thing happens where I go to the medium and then she tells me that he's kind of my guardian angel and he's been looking out after me.
Oh,
That's
love
wacky.
that. Now, your grandfather, Melvin Douglas, taught you to always order a club sandwich. What is in a good club sandwich? What are we getting?
Well, now I don't eat the bacon part.
Yeah.
But a club sandwich is basically toasted bread, mayonnaise, lettuce, and tomato. And you can have it with, I always ask to put avocado in it instead of the bacon. That's my favorite kind of,
And he told
sandwich.
you to do that because no matter where you go, they won't screw up a club sandwich.
So is a club sandwich and a BLT the same thing?
No, well, you can do, it's a variation. I think the traditional club is turkey, bacon,
Okay.
lettuce, and tomato.
Yeah.
But I think that there's variations on, I'm not a club sandwich Nazi. You could mix it up because I don't, but I think that any variation like that whatever their club sandwich is, because it is, as my grandfather said, you can be in India, you can be anywhere in the world and you can look down and you say, well, don't think I want to eat pigeon. Oh, okay, they've got a club sandwich.
Tell us about your conversation with Robert Redford, who spoke to you about working with your grandfather.
Well, this is funny. I actually told this story recently because on my book tour, I was back down at the Lambs Club in New York City. There are three theatrical clubs. There's the Lambs Club, but no, pardon me. The National Arts Club is where we shot Quiz Show. And so there's the Lambs Club, there's the National Arts Club, and then there's the Gramercy Hotel, which is right next door, those three theatrical places. But we had shot Quiz Show at the National Arts Club, and I had auditioned for a larger part in the movie. I didn't get it. And then I got a phone call from Robert Redford asking me to do this smaller part in the movie. He said it was going to be a couple scenes. It only ended up being one scene, to be Ray Fiennes' girlfriend. So I kind of couldn't turn it down. So go the day, and I go to hair and makeup, and I'm completely done up, and my hair is done, and I've got a 1950s dress on. And then that's when they tell me, oh, go to Mr. Redford's trailer. He'd like to talk to you. And so that's when we meet. He's very nice, and the writer of the film is there, and he's telling me about the candidate and how much he loved my grandfather, and that the reason he got into politics was because of my grandmother, Helen Gahagan Douglas's, when she ran against Nixon. And he said it changed his life. That's the whole reason he went into politics. And he's telling me stories about the candidate. And the clock is ticking. We're in there like an hour, and the first AD is coming to his trailer, like knocking on the door. And I'm inside in full, makeup. They're all waiting on the set. This is like a scene with hundreds of extras. And he's just, because he's Robert Redford, he goes, I'll be with you in a minute. You're like, no pressure. And he goes, anyway, Mel, and then he's telling like another, story after story, relaxed as could be. Another half an hour goes by, knock, knock, knock. It's the producer of the film. He's like, Bob, we really need to get, yeah, I'll be there in a minute. They are looking at me with daggers, like, who is this girl? And so that is, once again, like many of the stories I tell, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. But because of me, we stayed in his trailer. We were probably there like an hour and a half. So finally we emerge from the trailer. I'm getting all sorts of looks, of course, because I'm an actress. And he leaves, and there's crowds outside, and they're applauding, and he walks in. Oh, and the first AD and the producer and the writer, they're just like, looking at me, giving me dirty looks. And we walk in, and then I go meet Ray Fiennes, who had been in Schindler's List.
Yikes.
A little movie, which hadn't come out yet.
Oh,
so
my God.
I never heard of Ray Fiennes, and I'm his girlfriend in the scene, and we're chatting and this and that. And we, again, there was no internet then. So I was like, so what have you done? He goes, well, I just did this movie, Schindler's List. Oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, I heard about it.
Wow.
So,
Oh, wow. That
He was
is
lovely,
just,
So
by the
we
way.
want to get to Connecticut.
yeah.
But I want to
Yes.
add, you have to tell a little of the story about Marlon Brando.
Oh, yeah.
And set it up, because you were with Scorsese at the time, and he said, Marlon Brando's coming up. You want to meet Marlon Brando. And what happened?
Well, again, in longer detail, if people like these stories, they can read about them in these life-changing stories that are in the book, my first book. But the Marlon Brando stories, again, I idolize Marlon Brando. Obviously, I went to the neighborhood playhouse. I studied Meisner technique. So I was very much into the grittiness and learning about acting. I'd met Elie Kazan over the years. And he's like, he was, I think, our greatest actor that we had. And so I had a poster of him, on the wall and everything. And so when I heard about this opportunity to meet Marlon Brando, I said, I can't. My party we were at the Wilshire Hotel. I was doing a surprise, surprise, another low budget movie that later became a cult film. And I just was like, I can't, I don't even have the right clothes. I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not in the frame of mind to like cross into another galaxy to meet, somebody whose poster I had on my wall. And, Marty assured me I was fine. He just gave me very, strict, strict talk to like, don't talk about acting. And, he doesn't want to talk about acting and this and that. So I was so nervous. But of course, when he came in, and I wrote about this in the book, he was so large at that point. I mean, have any of you guys were you ever around Marlon Brando?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
He's
Your
very
description
tall.
of him coming through the door, I almost fell off my bed reading it. It was hysterical.
Because he was so wide that I thought there's no way he's going to be able to make it through the door. And we agreed, we were at the door, right? And I already realized, like, oh, we're way too close to the door. Like, we're going to have to back up, and he's going to have to come through sideways, and I won't be able to look because he'll see on my face, how large he is. And then he was wearing this blue, as I wrote about, a blue velour sweatsuit, which, when you go the sweat, you've given up all hope of any ever losing weight. Like you just,
Oh, man.
and I thought, where did he get that velour? Like, who would make a suit for him with that much velour? But anyway, he came in and within seconds, because I was trained, like I go, don't look at him, because if you look at him, you're gonna start to cry, So I decided I was just gonna look at the floor, and I noticed they were saying my name, so I knew at some point I was like, I'm gonna have to look up and make eye contact with him. But I was sort of furtively looking, because I thought it would be like the Bible. I would look at him and turn to stone or something. But anyway, he suddenly stopped and did this strange thing with me. Gave me a psychological analysis where he looked at my feet, and my feet were I guess I was sitting there kind of crunched over with my feet pointed inwardly. And he said, why are you sitting like that? That's a sign of insecurity. And I thought, oh my God, it's one of these tests now. Like, Brenda, I've read all about him. How do you answer? So I thought, I'm just going to be in the moment. And so I looked up and I said, I am insecure. And he said, why should you be why should you be insecure? And I said, because you're Marlon Brando. And I just started, of course, burst out crying. I said, you're like everything that I've ever wanted to be, and everything about acting. And maybe it might have been just the pure sincerity of not having of me expressing myself, and crying deeply touched him. Or maybe he doesn't get out much. I don't know.
It was so sweet. All your moments with big stars are like that. That's what I found so charming.
Illeana, ask Fritz about his Marlon Brando moment.
Please. I'm thrilled. We could.
It's not
yes.
that. I didn't get to be in his presence and feel the, the gravity from
but what
around.
you have to experience, what you have to picture is Marlon Brando laying in his home, wherever he would lay, and watching the news every night at 11. And imagining a friendship with our Fritz.
So
and then the phone rings.
I had a one-person show that was on PBS in Los Angeles, KCET. And it was about me being a father, and it aired 7 Father's Days in a row. And after the first night it aired, it was one of the fundraisers on KCET, and I got home, and the producer of the show called me and said, I'm going to give you a phone number. After you've called this number, lose the phone number. Don't share it with anyone. And I said, who is it? He said, it's Marlon Brando wants to talk to you. And I said, oh my God, what am I going to say to Marlon Brando? And I had all the, this was in his large girth period where, you know, he was a punchline in late night jokes. And I thought, I don't care. He's still one of the greatest actors of all time. So I called him up. I had a 45-minute conversation with this man that was one of the greatest conversations I've ever had in my life. He asked me where I workshopped the show. He told me about workshopping Streetcar Named Desire and how Tennessee Williams would come in with new sides every day. And I only breathed about 3 times during this 45-minute period. But I went from seeing him as culture was seeing him as this laughing stock to just having even more respect for this man than I did. And I still have his phone number written down at my house. And it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. But anyway.
Because it's sort of like he when he said to me, you know, because then he started crying. And then that's where that famous, you know, remark that he said, my God, she's a tuning fork. Now I'm crying.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing.
But it was his, I thought, demand for me to be authentic, you know, because again, I had spent all morning like, okay, what kind of a person do I want to be to meet Marlon Brando? And then all of that, he knocked through all of that facade. And the one smart thing I did was just like, go with it, you know, just go with like, as if I were really in an acting class. How are you feeling? And let's go for it. And then from that moment on, you know, everything changed, and we were, you know, ordering wine, and he's talking
you went
about
through like
Marilyn
3
Monroe
full-service meals. Oh my God! There's a great picture in the book of the
wreckage.
The wreckage after. You had a Marlon Brando meal. It's really, really funny.
Well, now we have another full circle moment for you, because I loved reading both of your books back to back, because there's just so many through lines. And so now you move back to Connecticut, and you're in the middle of renovating your dream home while writing about Connecticut. And so tell us about which one was more challenging, which one of these projects was more challenging, and what you gained.
Well, again, you know, very much like what I write about, I was susceptible to my own, what I was writing about, which was this fantasy of, you know, an idyllic life in Connecticut, in a farmhouse, you know, where a horse and sleigh comes up to the house. And I'm writing about it. And it was during COVID, of course, in LA. So I at night, I found myself, you know, scrolling through Zillow thinking like, yeah, I'll be like Barbara Stanwyck at Christmas, you know, and find my dream house. And then what was even weirder was that this house, which I'd known very well from when I was a kid and had all these key moments in the house. And so I had memories. So it was almost like going home again, and got in here and then realized, of course, the house was a complete wreck. But I still had to write the book. And then that's when I realized, this is crazy. I had to add this in the book. I'm now writing about Mr. Blandings builds his dream house, and I'm Mrs. Blandings. I'm going upstairs and talking to the workers, and people say to me, the book is so well researched. And it was a coping mechanism, because I would just put my headphones on and I would just do research, I think, because, you know, I didn't want to face what was going on around me. I didn't have a kitchen for over a year.
Oh.
I had like a little room with a hot plate.
Wow.
It was.
What was brilliant about the book, I thought, was that it reminded us of how much Connecticut represented middle upper class suburbia in all the movies in the 40s and 50s. Everything, you know, all the Cary Grant movies and the Barbara Stanwyck with Christmas in Connecticut and all those, that was sort of the idyllic representation of what suburbia was supposed to be for America.
Right. In fact, that was the line the thesis that I kind of wanted to prove, is that when we say the American dream, that phrase, it kind of comes from Mr. Blandings builds his dream house, which is all about post-war America, getting out of New York, going to, suburbia, being in Connecticut, and then having the White House with the picket fence. And the house that they're talking about is the Blandings house. And so what they're replicating is actually, for America, was in fact Connecticut suburbia. And it goes even deeper than that when you get into, where did Lucy and Ricky Ricardo go to live when they became successful? They went and lived in Westport, Connecticut. So it gradually, Connecticut kept upping the stakes, in that it was not only suburbia, but it was an upper class kind of suburbia, which was actually true, because a lot of the people that were Broadway producers were living here. Henry Luce, who was the publisher of Life magazine, was living here. Eric Hodgins, who wrote Blandings, was living in New Milford. Rod Serling was living here. Elia Kazan was living here. Arthur Miller was living here. Richard Widmark. So it was kind of like, these places like New Milford, like Westport. It's a lot of the liberal actors, but they were creating the culture for America. I mean, Life magazine was creating the culture for America, but the man who ran the magazine was living in Connecticut and part of Connecticut society, and that has never really been discussed. And I thought it would be something interesting
It was fantastic
to talk about.
First of all, it became the branding for the American dream. I mean, Ladies' Home Journal did layouts on it. Just the names of some of these places, like Still Meadow Farms. The state is like an LL Bean catalog come to life.
Exactly.
Martha Stewart should be the governor of Connecticut.
Is Green Acres, Connecticut?
I don't think so, because that's sort of more LA.
No, it even says Park Avenue in the song.
But they made it in, I think, wasn't it part of the whole Beverly Hillbillies kind of vibe?
Yeah, but it was just another rural comedy.
Junction.
But this time it was like, she just adores a penthouse view. Darling, I love you, but give me... I don't remember the lyrics. But anyway, I just thought when I was reading your book that even Green Acres was about like, oh, wouldn't it be healthier out in the country? Because that's what you talk about. It goes from like we go from like Connecticut represents country, peaceful living, healing, cleansing, being peaceful. And then in post-war, once we have that commute, once it's like the man is getting on a train and going elsewhere, then we have a challenge to the marriage. And then you get into the dark suburbia film. So talk about how even Connecticut shifts in terms of the character it plays in the movies.
Again, I wanted to sort of tell the story of how we went from dream houses to dark suburbia. So starting with movies like Gentleman's Agreement,
right?
Everybody moved to Connecticut and thought it was this wonderful, idyllic place. But then again, the cracks start to appear. So first of all, you have this separation in the marriage. The wife is trapped in Connecticut. The husband is now commuting back and forth, so they don't see each other until the end of the day, and that creates issues. Then you begin to have this idea of we have to restrict our neighbors, and we there's covenants which were up until the 60s. You were having, they wouldn't, to restrict blacks and Jews from upward mobility. So, and that wasn't talked about, but it was in fact a gentleman's agreement. So we wanted to keep suburbia very white. And then furthermore, then you get into movies like Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, which is now, you start to see that these values of the constant striving for the bigger house, the bigger car, is not only causing a strain on the marriage, but it's leading to a breakdown of the American, that the American dream is in fact a sham that was shoved on us. And so by the time you get to the movie The Swimmer, you have now a complete deconstruction of the American way of life that we were touting for all these years. And interestingly, after The Swimmer, when you could go no further, you get the Stepford Wives.
Yes,
which
when
is,
you could go no further.
Well, you get horror.
Yeah.
And that's
currently
so interesting. When I do the book events here in Connecticut, this is what I talk about. Because Connecticut itself as a state suffers from low self-esteem and has never grabbed an identity for itself, other people hoisted an identity on us. Originally, it was good, and then now it's very bad. So if you see someone in a movie and they're headed to Connecticut, you know somebody's
horrible. Lose their head. But you know what? That's a product of the changing culture. You know what I mean? That's not Connecticut. That's the changing culture. So they shouldn't get their self-esteem from outside sources.
I think it's Connecticut's proximity to New York that gives it an identity alongside that of Manhattan, right?
Yes, and yet time and again, the sculptor of Mount Rushmore, where did he make the sculptures? Here. You have the glass house.
Well,
here.
It is a granite
Calder. State. Yeah, you had the artist Calder here. You had the group theater in the 1930s was rehearsing.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about.
Here.
Actor Studio used to hold their meetings in Connecticut before they moved downtown, right? And who was in the group at that point?
And that's in the group, that would be Kazan, John Garfield, Harold Clurman, Arthur Miller, the director of one of the movies that I write about, Theodora Goes Wild, this guy, Richard Boleslavsky.
And that's the film your grandpa was in. And
so again, these experiences of teaching acting, which later became the method, which we all know as the method, the origins of this are started in Connecticut, but nobody ties that together. Another great example is Katharine Hepburn, who's kind of an ambassador for the state.
Yeah.
And her brand, as I always joke when I give talks, if you walk down the street in Old Saybrook, you'd see 100 Katharine Hepburns. But she created a brand. And so now whenever anyone is playing a rich heiress, they're basically doing Katharine Hepburn.
She patented the Connecticut lockjaw.
Well, does that dialect still exist, Illeana? Do we still have that like Atlantic, East Coast, almost British saying lobster?
Only in the older women, but it is a very patrician way of speaking that we know whether they do or not, that that they're blue bloods. They come from Greenwich. But you have time and again, you have people like the writer Claire Booth Luce, who was married to Henry Luce. She was born in the Bronx and was illegitimate, but her mother moved the family to Connecticut. And she assumed an identity. So everybody thought that, she assumed a Connecticut identity and later even represented the state in Congress and sent her daughter to school in Greenwich. And so she is really, it's interesting when you talk about great Connecticut women, she's part of that. So you can assume a Connecticut identity. It's representational of somebody who has a lot of money and class and went to good schools and things like that. Yeah.
Who are your favorite writers?
Oh God. I have so many. That's hard to, going back from when I was a kid, obviously Hemingway and Fitzgerald and Dorothy Parker, I really liked. I would read all the.
You remind me of her. You remind me of her. You're so funny. And are you working on a next project or?
I am. It's another movie book, which I can't really talk about. It's female centric, very, very female centric. I will say that, but there's a lot of men involved in it too. But it's about a female centric film that I'm going to deconstruct and talk about the making of it. And then I'm going to go back to my format of the stories I blame Dennis Hopper because I've got tons more stories. And now enough people have died that I can start to tell. So,
let's dig in. So you finished your book.
Won't get in trouble. Yeah.
Have you finished your house? And so where are we now? And are you satisfied with how everything's turning out?
I call it phase 3 because I'm optimistic. It is not done. But it's getting close to being done. And, but unlike Eric Hodgins, who wrote, Mr. Blandings, he actually lost his house. He went so over budget that he lost his house. And when he sold the rights to Hollywood, he tried to buy his house back and he couldn't. They wouldn't sell it to him. So he was devastated. He had to buy another house. But so I'm not there yet. But it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed my time here, although I do miss my friends in Los Angeles. But it was always a dream of mine to completely restore a farmhouse. And I can cross that off my bucket list now.
Yeah,
Well, you did something that I would consider being on my bucket list, which was you got to meet Joseph Mankiewicz.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Josh and Ben are both friends of mine, and I've been a big fan of Herman and Joe and read. I don't know if you read The Brothers Mankiewicz.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
That's a good book too.
Written by,
Yeah.
oh, there we
Right
go.
after your-
It's just a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
book. But you have a great encounter. You're a smart writer. Didn't you love the way he did such amazing movies, All About Eve, Cleopatra, A Letter to Three Wives. What I loved about those guys was, and I think Joe was like on the Algonquin Round Table for a while. Either that or Herman was. And the movies were smart. These guys were so bright in their writing and everything. It was a different time. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, very much so. Very literate. I love reading. Also, Billy Wilder. I put him in that category. They're just so, they were so smart and so well read, and that's when things like that. Being clever was very important in that group, and you had to, know all the best restaurants, and that was still when I was living in New York. That was still a part of it. I got the tail end of it, where you had to see the latest Broadway plays and go to the restaurants. And, so I got a certain taste of it. And I don't know if that exists really anymore. That kind of, you'd go out and go to Elaine's and see Tom Wolfe and, you see columnists, and you knew you were in the thick of things. That's what I loved about working for Peggy Siegel.
Yeah.
And it was great. And it gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of these people like Mankiewicz. And I was so lucky to have dinner with him a couple times. And I wrote about that experience in my book.
Yeah.
He was a great ladies' man.
Did you
the
see
picture
Mank
he sent you
on Netflix?
Yeah, that was crazy.
I know.
the
See, what's funny is the way times have changed so much. There'll be certain stories that I've told for 20 years that are just, kind of funny stories. And now when you tell stories, people gasp, which is not the intent. The intent is supposed to be that it's funny. But he sent me a picture saying, he wrote on it 20 years ago that this photograph would have been blurred. And I didn't, and I was staring at the picture and I didn't get it. And, Marty, of course, ripped it out of my hands.
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten it either, just so you know. Like, I would not have gotten it.
Did you see the movie Mank?
I did.
Did you like it?
It was okay. I love David Fincher and Gary Oldman is great. Everybody's great, but it was a little staid for my taste, but not my. I wouldn't put it on my favorite list about movies made about movies. I would say I'm more in the tone of like The Bad and the Beautiful, sort of more my cup of tea. I like things that are a little more visceral.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'd say you need to go get the book, Connecticut in the Movies by Illeana Douglas. And is there anything else folks should know about you before we wrap up?
Well, if you'd like to see where my events are going to be, you can obviously go to all the socials, on Twitter and now X, I guess it's called, and Instagram, and also on Facebook. I have a Connecticut in the Movies page, and where I list all of my upcoming events. And you can reach out to me if you want me to do a book. I've been doing a lot of book events, even in LA and in Palm Springs, because again, the book is not just about, it's 100 movies that are about Connecticut, but it's also, some of them are your favorite movies that you never know were made here, like Strangers on a Train, which was shot in Danbury, which I always find, the whole creepy scene where he strangles her was which is the Danbury State Fair, which is no longer in existence.
I think you could make a great coffee table book of photographs of the various locations that you talk about in your stories.
There's already 300 pictures in the book. Like we had to start.
Oh, yeah. No, you can head for Connecticut with the book on your lap and tour all the different places. You're very specific about where these movies were filmed or what homes are depicted, and so it's really fun and exciting just to have a real life movie star maps guidebook.
I did one like that many years ago. I used to do my own movie star tour in Los Angeles, and I used to go by Faye Dunaway's house because I knew where she had moved down from the hills. And then one day, it was like a Gotham Awards or something, I found myself sitting next to Faye Dunaway, and she goes, "Aren't you the actress that goes?"
There's some cosmic connection between you and many people in Hollywood.
Yeah, you definitely. The universe definitely hears your thoughts. I just want to put that out there. But like my movie star maps tour for out of town company was only the ones I knew were Lucy's house, Jimmy Stewart's house, because I think they were like 2 houses away from each other, and then Steve and Edie. For some reason, I thought that was a fun one to go and see.
As soon as I went to LA, in fact, I had a funny moment. I met Don Rickles, and I had been by his house because I had the movie star book many times.
Yeah.
And so I met Don Rickles, and I said, "Oh, you live?" I said, "Your house is so beautiful, the English country garden." And
how's that rose bush?
He goes, "Oh, have you been in my house?" And I suddenly caught myself, and I said, "No, I've just seen pictures.
I've been by."
Oh, God.
I realized, I've been, and I climbed the gate. Again, you get a lot. I climbed the gate of where Marilyn, I told Marlon Brando this, where in Brentwood, where Marilyn Monroe's house was. My friend and I climbed the gate, to see if we could get any vibes about her house.
Yeah.
And we were totally freaked out. I was convinced. I said, "Oh yeah, something really bad happened here."
You felt it while you were there?
I did, and then when I was talking to Marlon Brando about it, he said he thought they killed her.
Yeah,
he did too, huh?
Wow.
He did too. So tell me, since you knew
this Ruta Lee, the famous Ruta Lee, Ruta Lee.
Oh yeah.
So since you knew a lot of those old school movie stars from before the internet, when they would sell the map, on Sunset, was there competition? Did the stars feel kind of snubbed if they were not in the map?
When I first started getting the map, and it was a book, it was like a booklet. I would get it on Hollywood Boulevard, in where they had used to have Grauman's, which is now called something else. I got the book from there. And so when they were first doing the books, I believe it was more geared toward Lucille Ball and Jimmy Stewart. I wasn't interested in the newer stars at all. Okay. I don't care where Madonna.
When I was in the news business, we did an investigative piece with riding along on, TMZ has their own buses now where they take you around town for a tour. Oh. And they were being accused of making up fake trips. And so we recorded like 5 of these drivers giving tours through Beverly Hills, and 93.5% were all bullshit.
Really?
They weren't even the real houses of the people.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah. So it was all presentation.
Well, showbiz, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to read your closing credits. Fritz and I have created a web hub to help you shop for gifts and save democracy in one fun stop. Giftofdemocracy.com is a directory pointing you towards candidates and causes committed to protecting and defending our democracy. You can simply donate or browse for fun, swaggy merch for the loved one on your shopping list. Fritz and I make no money here. We don't need it. We're not running for office. Our site is like a mall directory sign that points you towards the merchandise and donate pages of worthy candidates and causes. It's the donation that counts. Democracy makes a great gift. You will find the link in our show notes. Thanks for coming along down the media path. Let's continue the conversation on Instagram and Twitter. We are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where our show page is Media Path Podcast, and our Facebook group is Media Path with Fritz and Wheezy Podcast Community. We are also a video podcast on YouTube with so much added visual content. Watch us and subscribe at Media Path Podcast. Write to us at MediaPathPodcast@gmail.com and kindly give us a nice rating wherever you get your podcasts. Share our social media posts, which will allow you to show off your excellent taste in podcasts. Our website is MediaPathPodcast.com. There, you can catch up on episodes and binge our saucy newsletter loaded with photos, quizzes, and backstage gossip. We want to thank our wonderful guests, Myra Page, Joan Bowman, and Illeana Douglas. Our team includes producer Dina Friedman, John Maddox, Bill Filipiak, Mason Brown, Garrett Arch, Raf Rusak, Jordan Reyes, Nick Broussard, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker, here with Fritz Coleman. Be well and wise, and we will see you along the media path.